which makes you be further than the erectus, but your genus is say homo, which is meaning you were created in the same likeness and image as these monkeys, chimpanzee, the rest, but you had something that was added onto you, animals, who at one point were blended in with the animals. And you read this in the book of Genesis, where the first helpmeet that was provided for Adam was animals. So you find Kama Sutra in the book of Genesis. People don't know that because before they had to introduce Eve, what did they introduce? Animals. They said, yo, let Adam go and name the animal. What was the purpose of it? They said, it's not good for man to be alone. You understand? So if they needed a helpmeet for him, they were speaking about reproduction. So if they provided an animal for him first, what do you think was happening then? An experiment, what, of sex?
Well, yeah.
And what, well, animals?
Well, I tell people there's a reason why they put don't lay with the animals in the Bible. Because somebody had lain with the animals.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
That's when you get into the label. Exactly. You getting it. Name, which is to deal with the sex. The same way knowledge was to deal with sex. You understand? Like to know somebody. If you knew not your husband back in that day, if the woman knew not her husband, that means she hadn't had sex with him, intercourse with her husband. You understand? So here's my point of saying it all. My point of saying it all was the access to the tree of life was cut off, and they cut that off for a reason. So if you have, my point is, you have the basic information of good and evil, and you really understand what is being said there, because how can somebody say, for instance, if you're dealing with Sodom and Gomorrah, the people who were supposed to be the victims of that story, all right, who did not evade, who were not of the family of Lot or Sabria, who didn't escape the destruction, would they say that that was God's good, that was a good God that did that to them? No, they would look at the act of all of the children who died and passed away, because you know there were children in the cities and all of that just based off of the story. All right, everybody that was there that passed away who could have possibly been innocent, who just perished alongside these demonic ass people, they would look at it and say, this is an evil deed. Somebody killed all these people. When you think of the angel of death passing over Egypt, go ahead.
Wait, yeah, I don't want you to say too much because I want you to stick to the garden because it's a dope story. Since you were on the Adam and you went back to the trees and you were on the animals, let's stay in this garden for a minute because this a dope place. So you do have an aspect of this tree of life, right, in the garden that man was cut off from, quote unquote, metaphorically speaking, right? What is that tree of life to you? Where is that tree of life?
It's in the brain. It's actually literally in the brain. It's something referred to as the arbor vitae, which is, you go look that up, and it means tree of life.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm speaking about?
Mm-hmm.
So that's literally, okay, so you go look that up. Does it not look like a tree? And isn't it past where you get to the base of the skull, or Calvary, or Golgotha, where you're reaching this tree of life, where, let's say, if you started at the Adam, which will be right where the root chakra is connected, because if you have roots, you have to be connected to something. Or you have to be moored to something in order for them to be roots. Roots are not just there for no reason. So if you say there's a root chakra, that means it's rooting you somewhere, which is rooting you to the ground. What's the Hebrew word for ground? Adam, or Adama, to be specific. Okay, so then, all right, if we're coming out of the Adama up to Eve, we have to make a travel upwards, all right? And that's when you reach the tree of life. And if you notice, they said now the man has become like one of us. Now the man has become like one of us. If you notice, they said the man was cursed to return back to the dust. Okay.
No, we're gonna go slow. We're gonna slow it down for the people because I want the people. Don't leave. Because we're gonna stay on that particular topic because he's hitting on some important points, and I don't want you guys to miss anything. All right. Did you catch it? Are you catching it? Right? Wait, let's get him back up here. His phone swipe. Here we go. Hold on. Sage, I see you. I got you coming up too, bro. Let's go.
That was my bad, bro.
Oh, no, you're good, G.
Oh, man.
All right. So now let's stay there. I want to stay here because it ties into actually the lesson that we were talking about and what I've been talking about this whole time. We were tying in this Draco, and I want to, because believe it or not, you guys don't know, this actually ties into Draco as we're talking about these serpents, right? And remember, the serpents are representing a certain flow and movement of energy, right? These are what these serpents represent. But I want you to understand that serpent that we are talking about in the garden was around the tree or near this tree of knowledge of good and evil, supposedly, when people make it. Why do you not see a depiction of the serpent near the tree of life? Or why do you think that is, guys?
You say, guys, you wanted to
Oh,
let the other brothers respond?
what was
Yeah,
the
anyway.
question? You went in and out on my side.
Yeah, why was notice when you think of the serpent, when you think of the Nachash, which we already broke down what that was and everything, why do you think that people associate it with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil only, and don't associate it or have it nowhere near this tree of life when people think about it?
Because morality, I mean, knowledge is not
Well, you
morality.
add the
I think
dogma
it's not
into it. Go ahead.
morality is morality and ethics kind of deals with more than just the psychology of man, I guess, you know? It's dealing with there's a philosophy that you have to kind of use as a basic framework before you can even try to descend into, you know, intellectual debates and what is more important and what, you know, which form of intelligence is higher than the other and who deserves more, you know? I think that's the real question of it, because you know, knowledge of good and evil is not the same as knowledge of or experience of life. You know, like it could be useful that you have a cool, interesting relationship with religion, but also like you know, here's a better example. You know, like a gang member will still go to church and repent for his sins, but you know, if he's repeatedly going for 50 times, you know, there's a problem there. There's a there's repentance that you can't catch up to at some point, right?
Well, I feel like they understand it from the scapegoat form of information that we've been given as a whole, and it's not the actual truth. You know what I'm saying? That's why there's certain people that know the actual truth. I feel like the serpent was the scapegoat, and that's why they use it in the way, you know, in the West
Wait,
side they say that this snake is evil.
wait, hold on. Y'all come off y'all cameras real quick. Okay, you're off. It's not letting phase up.
No, I'm a,
Oh, you
No,
up? Oh, okay, my fault. I was about to say, there you go. I was
nah,
like,
that
what the hell my
was weird
camera
though.
at?
It did cut me out
Yeah,
for a
did some
second.
weird shit. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
It's all
right
good.
before you came on.
Okay, yeah. This thing tripping. All right. Okay, so continue. Now, Faze, why do you think that most people associate that snake with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they give it no association with the tree of life?
Well, in all actuality, this serpent, if we're dealing with the story at all to be a real story, it could not have been the only being of its kind, because it said in that story that there was going to be an enmity between and a separation of the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. You go read Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and you realize, well, this isn't the only being then, because in order for this serpent to have a seed, and we're not talking about a snake, we know we're talking about a subtle being or a creature, as they call it, who was of the field. And we knew it wasn't a snake because it wouldn't be cursed to crawl in its belly. That's symbolic. All right. So this means that this was a group of beings who also had information. But look at what I'm
Stop.
telling you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Stop right there. We covered those beings, guys, didn't
Yeah,
we?
we did.
So
We did.
I don't know who those beings were. Now, the word there was a being by the name of the Nachash. Now, that's an ancient Kemetic word for a group of people called the Nachasim, right? And the word Nachas is the word for a Nubian. So now, why do you think that they would call this a snake? The word that we would use for Nubian would also be the word for snake, but it's also the word for Naga, Negus, and all of these. And he just mentioned that there was more than one. Yeah, there were many. And that the word that also goes with that Nachas is a word called Nacheb. Nacheb means to plow. It's funny. Nacheb, cow, this deity of the serpent, right? And dealing with plowing, that was the punishment of man.
Right.
Man had to plow the field afterwards. But if you don't get the cosmology and the psychology, because psych is soul, then you'll miss it. If you take it literal, you'll miss the entire story, right? But continue, Faze.
Exactly. It's a world of fallacy. First of all, why was it that Adam and Eve weren't already herded around the tree of life? Why did he find them over by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why was Eve near that tree? You understand? Instead of, yo, why don't you eat of this tree over here called the tree of life? Well, we have to look at this. It's going to be real interesting. So y'all try to keep it with me for the next 30 seconds to 60 seconds, right? When you think of the word fallacy, which I've broken down for people before, you're dealing with a word there that says phallus. And a phallus is a penis, right? And when you think of the image of a snake or a serpent, right, you'll say, well, this is a penis. Well, not every man can relate to that, but y'all know what it means when you say, yo, my anaconda is a snake or a serpent. Some niggas can't relate, but for the people who can, you know, so niggas who can't, just try to keep up. We're referring to our penis. And what we're saying is, well, this is similar to that shape. So then you have two messages there, or two spirits operable there, where the elders used to teach us you're either going to think from the head up top, the above head, or you're going to think from the head below, right? So what does that say? The 9 as opposed to the 6, your guide head as opposed to the animalistic head, your frontal cortex or your prefrontal cortex or your frontal lobe as opposed to the basal ganglia or the reptilian brain, right? So watch this. You have what's called caduceus, which is still to say double spirit. You say duce or duces, you're saying two. And what was the ka? The ka was the spirit. So this serpent or these coiled snakes is what caduceus would bring you to. Coiled snakes had to rise up toward the top, past this tree that was in the midst of the garden. So I can show you right here in what you have the, what was the underwear brand? Fruit of the Loom. You go and look at the Fruit of the Loom, which was an underwear brand. What did it cover? It covered the garden in the middle, or the tree in the midst of the garden. But for the men who wear it, what was it covering up? The snake right there, which was the penis or the phallus, or a world of fallacy. And you know this is a world of fallacy. That's why I tell people, if you want to know what this world is ran off of, just look at the capitals and how you have the monument right there, which is the obelisk needle, which is really a penis, right there in Washington, D.C. So stay with me. Here's my point of it all. It was all about men and their penis. It was all about what happens when men figure out that their penis is a magic wand, that if they do enough spell work, are you with me? Yeah. They have an explosion or ejaculation, then there's a point where they say, voila, or here it is. But because of that light that they were operating, you say, voila, violet, it brings you closer to the red. They're not able to ascend to the green, which was Eve. So this is my point from earlier. Remember, it was mankind. Man fell. Man wasn't worthy. Now the man has become like one of us, knowing good from evil. But what? We don't want him to touch the tree of life, meaning we don't want him to really understand what it means to become a woman or become a full humanoid being or a homo sapien being until he learns how to control his penis. So you say, how can you prove that the tree of life was referring to the essence of the woman? Well, the word life means Eve in Hebrew. If you say in Hebrew, Eve, right, you're saying life. If you say Hawa, you're saying life. If you say Haya, you're saying life. And all of these are words that tie you to the green light or the woman. So I'll leave you with this. Why do I say she is the full human being? Well, you have the whole system. Man, you have the whole system. Every man on here, you have a system that says you're supposed to be a homo sapien, but you're not a full homo sapien being. In order for you to be a homo sapien being, the only thing that's separating you from being a reptilian yourself, all the people talk about reptilians, only thing that's separating you from being a reptilian yourself is the fact that you have follicles that yield hair, all right? And you have mammary glands, and you have a pituitary gland that's supposed to be operable. And you have the breasts that allow for you to what? Nurture, which brings you to the nature of what the essence of the homo sapien is supposed to be, or what the mama L, listen to the word, mama L, the God mother, mama L, or the mammal of this planet is supposed to be able to do. Hold on, I'm almost there, Happy. If you men who take on this form as the XY chromosome were the full God beings, you would be able to nurture, but you can't nurture. But why do you have nipples? Why do you have milk glands and they don't function? Why don't they function, Faise? Well, you human beings who take on the form of male don't have the hormone levels that will allow for you to produce, right, the nurturing milk and honey that feeds life. So my point is this. Once mankind figured out that they had something dominating in this realm, not only just their stature, but their penis, and they ran around, they were raping, they were pillaging, they were overpowering. The Moabites took certain sciences, they overpowered the women. The women took a liking to certain groups of men, they overpowered them, and they what? Isaiah 14:14. I'm going to build my kingdom above God's kingdom, okay? It's man who has to get their life in order. So the reason why they were stuck at that tree in the midst of the garden is because Adam hadn't ascended past the penis, and all it took was the serpent, who another group of beings who were masculine beings, to come forth and say to Eve, hey, look, we got something to offer you. Take a bite of this fruit, right? And that's where Eve started to realize, from the mixing in of those genes, okay, and the explosions in her womb, and from then on, which the seed is actually rejected by the mother in the womb. They won't tell you that scientifically it happens that way. But what did he curse her with? You're going to have painful childbirth. You're going to have all these sorrows. And she didn't have that before. But because she started to sleep with men and interact with men who hadn't reached that womanhood, are you with me? Some niggas don't want to hear this. You mean our purpose in life as masculine or XY chromosome is to return to the XX chromosome? Exactly. Or you remain a defect, because in all actuality, it's a reason why they call it a broken X chromosome. So they were at that tree because they hadn't yet reached the awareness or the intuition and the womanhood or the godhood that these beings called Luciferians, Lucy, they go back in science, say the mitochondria Eve had reached naturally.
I resonate with all that.
Okay.
I resonate with all that.
So now we're going to get into, he's speaking about the the rudimentary parts, right? Like the breast, the blah, 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 blah. Well, it'll appear that woman made man for a purpose. It wouldn't seem that man would be a defect. It would seem like, and if we study our ancient cultures, we see that the great mothers created man.
Right, because that's all we've been talking about.
So there was a purpose. There's a purpose for man in the state, in the condition that he's in. And as a matter of fact, a man can nurture. Men can nurture, whether people believe it or not. And this is where the mammal species separates himself from the reptilian species. Remember, we were talking about the substantia nigra, this area of the brain that deals with what people call reptilian brain. It's not only responsible for sex, it's not only responsible for breathing, it's not only responsible for balance, right? It's responsible for feeding, these basic things. But what does a mammal do or have that this doesn't? High level emotion.
Right, the high sensory.
High level emotion. And when you get to the ultimate, like the zenith of emotion, you get to what's called compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
You see, this is something that the mammal possesses, male and female. Even though this is a feminine trait. We know that this is a feminine trait. We know that it comes from mother. But yet men have it also, right? There are many feminine things that men have. Don't associate male and female with masculine and feminine.
Feminine, yeah, that's a sign.
So we deal with the feminine aspects of the spirit, right? Patience, long-suffering, gentleness, meekness. You see what I'm saying? All the things that are receptive. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So even men are capable of these things. You see?
Yeah.
Wait,
All
say
this.
that again? You said Jen?
No, even men.
Oh, man.
You know, this was
Look at it like this, Heavy, and that's a fact. So here's what I want people to understand. I didn't come up with the term broken X. I didn't come up with the science that explains that, well, that XY chromosome is missing something. It actually is missing, right, about 20% of the information that creates this second X that says this is a full mammal. So let's look at it like this. There are other types of beings in this reality that reproduce through what's called parthenogenesis, and you got the salamanders and the snakes and all these other beings. So let's say that it was a snake, literally, but we're not dealing with that. Even if it was a literal snake, there was a possibility of a process of asexual reproduction, right? So it's being argued in science to this day that the original males, which now you call them females, in science, the original males had double X chromosomes. So the true man or male would have actually been the woman, and the true Homo sapien, full Homo sapien being would have actually been the woman. Here's what I mean by nurture. When you're saying you can attach a baby, a newborn, to the breast and have it be that they can be fed milk and they can be fed nutrients straight from God themselves, right? Man can't do that. So here's the question. Why do men have nipples? Why do they have nipples, but they're not able to breastfeed?
It's a rudimentary part. You know, all things start off as female up to a certain.
Yeah, we know that.
It chooses at a certain point. So
then here's the thing. Why do men keep their science is asking this question just as I am. Why do men keep their nipples? If you don't need them, see, you dropped a piece of you off that you didn't need. You don't have a tail, you have a coccyx bone, right? But you don't have a tail, you don't have the monkey side. You don't need that. Not in your essence as human beings. Go ahead.
I think that I think that all women could attest to this. Also, even women like breast.
Yeah.
So I think that just aesthetically, that it remained a part of us. Like look at a chest without no nipples on it. It would kind of look weird.
Right, but it has your nipples have glands in them that don't function. So look at it like this. If it was just aesthetics, right? Then why did they have to have the parts, the function, the parts that would need to create the milk, the parts that would need to create the nurturing sputtle or the spittle that can help the child survive? Men have nipples that have the glands or the mammary glands that if the pituitary were able to, with enough hormone level, activate, you could yield milk, but you can't do it.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I think that a lot of men out here today would have loved to have tried that and not gone through some operations.
So you get what I'm saying? Because look,
Yeah.
there's no answer to that. There's no answer to that question other than the fact that somebody is incomplete. It's like if you have, let's say we show up and we got it, you and I, all right, we in a shootout with some other motherfuckers. We show up, I got my gun, let's say I got a Taurus, whatever, you got whatever the fuck you came with, and boom, it's time to shoot. I get to shoot and I look at you and say, what's up? And you say, what you mean? Hey, you said, I brought my gun. I said, nigga, we in the shootout. Shoot. I don't have no bullets. I said, what do you go get some bullets? They don't make bullets for this gun. Then what the fuck do you have that gun for? You say, what? It makes me look like a thug. So that's the aesthetic part about it. So then when you deal with the actual need for you to be able to show up and do exactly what's supposed to be, so then ask this question, are you really being that human? Are you really fully a human being if that Homo sapien in its totality is able to yield?
Yes, because at a certain point, that woman's breast milk wasn't enough for that child. And she had to go out and she had to go and get food of more substance other than that milk.
Because somebody told us that it wasn't.
No, we know that today. If you put a woman, men have killed a lot of these animals off. You know what I'm saying? Because they were predatorial towards us. And they were preventing our women from being in such safe havens and things like that. So men had to ensure a safe place. Men had to be the providers of sustenance after that milk. Men became nurturers to that degree. Men had to provide.
Right. So then watch this. Why were men in the wrong habitats?
Men provided nourishment.
Men were trying to conquer the world and wind up in the jungle where the lion was at and say, I got to kill this lion.
No, but Faise, okay, but think about this. Think about this.
Mm-hmm.
If even, okay, not run to the jungle. Where was man at? Okay, put them wherever they were, wherever the place that they were in the first creations of wherever they were, the first Homo sapiens. Where were they?
In Africa.
Were there not snakes present? Were there not predatory creatures that were present? And is it not natural for a baby to be weaned off of their mother's milk? Well, then what are they going to eat after that? What do they eat after they're weaned off of the milk? They need something of substance, right? So man had to play an important part in this at this stage.
This is why the women, you said something earlier that was very strong, right? Well, everything you've been saying is strong. You said something that I thought was a point that could tie into right here. Mother Ninti, right? Who is the scientist that was accredited to be behind the project called Man. And they referred to her as Ninti, which gave you different translations. One of the translations brought you to Mother of the Rib, which that's what you find in the story. Oh, Eve came from Adam's rib, which we see to this day that doesn't make sense. When we understand chromosomes and how they rest in the ribs, and you say, well, this 46 here was a step down from the 47, or a step up, really, rather, but they painted as down from the 47 to the 48, which gave you the monkey, which 2 steps away from Homo erectus, you have the Homo sapiens. So these Eve beings, these mother beings, all right, or mother of the ribs, they were the God mother. They were the women who reigned supreme, right? When you have these Branchauds who were men who were saying, let's go out and let's conquer, which they were so, he said they were created to do certain jobs, right? And this would have been mess up for seeding this project and then falling victim to, and they started to admire man so much that they let man, watch this, they let man take over the world. There was a garden. Let's go back to the beginning. You said, look, let's not leave from the garden. There was a garden where they were protected. They created environments where you didn't have these beings who were predators. You didn't have these beings who could attack the newborns. You didn't have these beings. But then what? Another being that was likened unto Adam snuck into the garden. And that being had the information that Adam, as soon as he got it, what happens? Man does the same thing that the serpent did, which goes out and conquers the world. Or like you find, you got to go to the Quran to find how this connects. Because remember, Iblis, who was supposed to be that serpent, stated his mission in the beginning. He said, because you caused me to walk in error, or because you wanted me to be of the lowly, what he said, I'm going to make all of those who walk in the order of you, arm, leg, arm, head. And we know who that is. It's not man. Man doesn't have 5 points. Even if people make this thing about, well, the 5 points, it's not the man, right? We're going to make all these people who walk in your order fall victim, what he say, to disobedience. So watch this. I'm laying with this. Give me 15 seconds. If that were the case, Iblis, the serpent, the devil, right? Because you can say that the serpent is the devil. All you got to do is refer to Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 through 9, and you'll find that they said that the devil was that old serpent. And if we talk about that old serpent, you ain't talking about nothing but the motherfucker who was the god of chaos and the god of deception, called Apep, who was a serpent in ancient Egypt. If this being were likened unto the same being who was Adam, who had a penis, who had a fallacy, and was able to be attached to it, and was able to lead this rest of this world into the darkness, then that's exactly what they did. And that's what Adam, to this day, grew to be. Now we're the dominant ones. We run everything. But the truth of the matter is, the reason why this world is out of whack is because of men. We led all the wars. We slaughtered all the people.
I don't disagree.
We created all the atomic bombs.
I don't disagree with any of that shit, with men being the cause of a lot of things. Women play a part too, but that's a different narrative. Men are responsible. You got to ask yourself this question: if you're going off of the story of the Bible, if you're using that for the genesis of it all, and looking at it literally, right? Men would have come first, right?
The water was here first. Wrong.
No. Talking about man and woman, not female and male.
Right.
Because what you're describing is cosmological things at that point, which would be masculine and feminine, right?
No, I'm actually referring to the water, and the life that would have been present in it was female.
Right. Yeah, that's none. But once again, we're talking cosmology. We're not talking about the actual physical manifestation of a Homo sapien. All right. So we're talking about the first physical manifestations of the Homo sapien. We see that was a man.
We know that a woman. And that male is what?
And so no, but I'm bringing that up. So if we're going to use that story, now I want to ask you, if you're basing it according to that story, what would have been the point of the extra parts based off of that story?
That's my point. Here's the key thing right here. If you notice, I'm not sticking only to the Bible. Like if we speak in terms of the Bible, there are so many different stories that came together to create the story. That's why I tied you to Mother Ninti, which is actually ancient Sumerian. If we were to speak about the flood, I say, okay, we go Utnapishtim. We can't stop at Noah.
Wait, stop right there. So you went to the ancient Sumerian story. We read this for those who were in the last masterclass. Y'all know not this one, well, 2 classes ago, we read the Enuma Elish, right? And we read Berosus' 7 days of creation. And in that story, we see that it was the mother goddess, Bilal Elite, right, Malad?
Beletili, yeah.
Yeah, Beletili. who created man, and it was so dope the way she created him, because this is where we get our origins of the pizza, right? And it was funny because it was Unki who actually was telling man to go knock on particular spaces, go to these demon doors. When we get the phrase "go take it to that nigga door," that literally comes from the Sumerian tablets. That was what Unki, that was literally what Unki was telling the wise man, the first wise man, one of the wise men that he picked out, named Atra Hasis, right? Who was one of the wise men. And he told him, yo, take this, knock on the door, because they were experiencing these things, right? Things were happening. So we see that a similarity, but we see that it still was a being or a man or a God-like man that was instructing this wise man, right, to do something. But this was a God. It was Anki that was doing that. Do you see what I'm saying? It was Anki. So in the story, we get a Nachash, we get a serpent, right? But remember, I just showed you what the word Nachash or Nachasim means to the ancient Egyptian. It meant a Nubian. And remember what you just said about that there was multiple of these motherfuckers in the garden, right? So now we go to Revelations, which is New Testament shit, and they say, remember that serpent in the garden? Oh, that was the devil. Well, wait a minute. Who was the New Testament to go and tell you that that serpent in the garden was the devil?
We would
Because
have,
that's not,
how would you test it?
right, but that's not what Judaism tells you. Now, we know what the New Testament is. We know that this is Pauline Christianity. We know that it comes from Plato. Matter of fact, Revelation doesn't even fit, because Revelations is more of a Vedic text than it is anything else. That's why it deals with the 7 dragons, the 7 seals, the 10 this, the 3 crowns of this. They're telling you this is all Vedic. The book of Revelations, that is Vedic. You get what I'm saying? We know that, and everybody know I rumble this so much. We know that John didn't write John, Mark didn't write Mark, Luke didn't write Luke, and none of those. It's the Gospels according to. But we know what schools in Egypt that those come from, right? So when we get into these texts in the New Testament, I can't use that to vouch for the old, because the Jews don't use that to
Well,
vouch
watch this.
for the old.
Look at it like this. Here's a question, because that's a good point. So it asks a question. Why did they call him, or why was this being referred to as the devil in the book of Revelation, chapter 12? And I'm not,
Okay.
I'm asking to see if you were familiar with. Go ahead.
That old serpent, the devil. I remember.
What did this old serpent do?
But now, when we get into what a serpent is and what those powers are, see, our people didn't see the serpent that way.
Oh, check this out, Heavy. I'm asking the question. What did the serpent do that made them say, yo, we needed to war with them? It was, I can tell you.
Remember now, are you talking about the dragon that chased the lady?
They named them, and that's so interesting. They named them all in Revelation chapter 12, verse 8, right? Revelation 12, 7 through 9. If you pull it up, you'll find it.
No, but I'm just making sure, because I'm making
That's
sure.
what I'm saying. They named them. They said the dragon, the devil, that old serpent. They named different ways that people have spoken about this being.
No, but I get that. But do you remember the story of how it was talking about the dragon, that dragon chasing the lady
that wanted to consume the child? Yes, that's in the same. Revelation 12.
That wanted to consume the child. Now, do you not get the cosmology of the story?
Look at what I'm saying. I don't know where you're going. I'm saying, like, look, why did they want to destroy or cast out this devil or this old serpent? What did he do? It's something specific that they mentioned that he had did or had done. And they said he deceived the whole world. He deceived the whole world. And if we look in the word deception, right, you'll find deception, falsehood, fallacy, right, and phallus. Who was the ones who set up their world based off of the phallus or the obelisk needle?
Bible.
The men, go Revelation chapter 12. That whole Revelation chapter 12 is based off of the war that's taking place in the heavens, where there's also being mentioned a heavenly allegory of the woman, right, and the child that was to be born. But just as much as there's an allegory, there's a literary too, because I was speaking about the children like myself who would come out of certain women at a certain period of time who would war with that dragon. and remind people who the beings who are on this planet are that are out of order. And this being wouldn't want that to happen, because you bring people closer to the feminine mind as opposed to the masculine mind, right? People stop living so primitive. People stop acting closer to animals. So again, that brings us to the conversation of who is closer to animal, the man or the woman? Who's closer to Homo erectus, the man or the woman? And
No.
it's the man. But
And I'm
watch
just
what I'm
gonna
saying. If we're saying this, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm just gonna read that for people so they can actually see the scripture that you're referring to. So this is Revelations chapter 12, right?
Verse
It
7
says,
through 9.
"Oh, you know, hold on, I'm gonna give it context. I'm gonna read the first verses too, just so they can get context. And there appeared in a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, all right, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, all right. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered." Now, who was this woman? Was this a literal woman? No, because she was a great wonder in heaven, and she was clothed with the sun, and the moon was under her feet. Now, let's see. And there appeared another wonder in where was this wonder? In heaven. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We'll get into the Draco constellation in a minute. And 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of the heaven. When it says it drew, we're talking about the magnetic field and the pull of it, right? And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her children as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And the child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, almost like Eden, that they should feed her for 1,260 days. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought his angels and prevailed not, and neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with them. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved their lives unto death.
Righteous. So watch this. When did the salvation come? Before or after this serpent is cast down?
The salvation came after.
So that is my point. It's like this. I think the reason why the conversations, and we able to do it, but a lot of times when I have these types of conversations with people who were not able to move forward, is because people do, and you mentioned this, they get stuck on the male and the female being only masculine or only feminine, not dealing with the fact that you have both aspects in you. When I'm speaking on women and the mind of women, I'm not just speaking, because you got women who have subscribed to the fallacy world. You have women who have subscribed to just being melanin or independent. I'm going to do all this by myself and all this other. It's women who are contributing to the same fallacies that says that you're disrupting harmony, right? However, that woman that you find who was doing that, she's still closer to God than the man who's doing it, because she still has in her essence. And what I mean by God is to say that if they said, let us make man in our image, if we want to still refer to the story of the book, because we can go a lot of books, but if we're referring to the story of this particular book, referred to as the Bible, if we were to piece it together and say, well, they said, let us make man in our image and after the likeness of whoever these God beings were. And we would say that we don't want whoever this being was to reach the tree of life, which we just spoke about 5, 6, 7 minutes ago, about the tree of life. We don't want this being to reach the tree of life. Then that life word, meaning Eve, is saying that whoever this Eve being was either is God themselves or is close closer to God than his man is. And this being who is man would have had to conquer whatever they needed them to conquer before they reached this tree of knowledge of good and evil. So watch this. I landed with this. When you're going into Buddhism, it brings you to the study of the caduceus. It brings you to the study of the phallus or the penis. It's all about pleasure as opposed to paradise. All this Buddhism, Sikhism, it's all the same thing. Pleasure as opposed to paradise. Any Buddha who became awakened, which is what the word means, Buddha means awakened. Anybody who reached this Christ or Christ level or Krista, because the word Krista in Sanskrit means attached or attracted to or attached to. Anybody who attracted or got that cord connected to this highest one thing. What you remember when Jaden Smith was tripping? Everybody said, this nigga tripping. What'd he say? He said, I'm going to cut off my penis. Right? They said, this nigga, he almost spit you almost spit your water. And he said, I'm going to cut niggas. Every nigga, I remember I was in high school when he said it. Every nigga was like, bro, this nigga's tripping. But I was thinking, I said, what would make a man say he's going to cut off? Either you want to go through a sex change, but if you look into who he's the child of, as Will and Jada are both warlock and witch, they're both adepts, not to say it in a negative connotation. I'm saying literally they're adepts in these sciences. You could tell by just looking at their essence. Okay, this man was exposed to some type of higher information. Every monk, every Buddha, everybody who reached this level when they were going through the Tibetan schools, they said, we have to abandon the carnal mind. They even put it in the Bible. They said the carnal mind can't please who? God. So if you really had to ask yourself, who was the true image of the full Homo sapien being who was made in the image? Because if we're Homo sapien, and if we're subscribing to even just the idea of the story, then whoever these beings were who made quote unquote man as male and female created he them as a group of beings, or however the tie-off happened after that from the broken X chromosome, these beings were made after the image of other humanoid beings. And if Homo sapien was that image, well, then the women of your planet Earth, of our planet Earth, are closer to God, and their brains operate closer to how God speaks. Doesn't that make sense, though? When we say Medu Neter, and you say the word of God, and you say Medu Nature, people say that means Mother Nature. You're only saying that phonetically. The actual words themselves mean the words of God. And you say the waters were here, and you say, that's a ma. And that sound literally means water. And you find out that all of this comes from water. And the women, they say, what, when we come here? The water broke for us to come here. We traveled through the water, the same stuff we heard a million times. Is it really hard for men to realize that on your journey, in order for you to really understand what it means to be God's here, you would have to, at one point or another, bring it back to the Lucy movie. What? You're going to choose whether or not you're going to just reproduce, or you're going to reproduce like Ray can, because that's all you're doing. You're just saying, yo, I can't myself perform parthenogenesis. Never have I been documented in history to be even able to. But I can perform like Ray or produce like Ray. You say reproduce. I can produce like Ra. And you go back further enough, you'll find out Ra was even feminine. And you say, well, I can produce like the mother. So you can reproduce, or you can become what? You can become immortal, beyond a mortal being, or beyond an enos. Are you with me? So my point is this. I'll land 10 seconds. If man can realize that the world is out of order because we've strayed away from the way of the water, why do you think they come up with a movie, Avatar, the way of the water? We strayed away from the way of the water. We don't remember who really runs the show. And she steps back and says, okay, cool, you run it. And then what are we doing? Even in the conscious community, what are we doing? We're fucking everything up. And if we just stop and step back and say, okay, we need to birth a new nation. We need to do this a new way. Bring in a new dominion, Anno Domini. And let this be the year of our Lord, she'll get it back in order. And the man who's in the mind of the essence of the feminine will also be able to help.
All I want to say is to all my people, a part of the conscious community, hi, nice to meet you. I'm not a part of your community. You know what I mean? Like, no, I get it. We all have to be a part of something. I just drive past that suburb. You know what I'm saying? I don't live in it. You know what I'm saying? I just drive by it, guys. You know what I'm saying? The conscious community, you guys will take words and remake them and remix them. You have your own truths and your own sayings and your own states. And I tell you that there is no new truth. That truth is absolute. That truth has always been here. You see what I'm saying? And when you're saying that it's your truth, you're ultimately saying this is my opinion that I'm going to die on or something. But it's definitely not the truth. So I encourage everybody to get out of the conscious community and actually become conscious. You know what I'm saying? And we talked about tech earlier. We talked about true technology. True technology is art, which is expression of self. Anything that allows you to express yourself fully is the ultimate form of technology. And that doesn't come by way of just being in the spiritual community. You know what I'm saying? Too many of y'all wearing the same beads. Too many of y'all wearing the same, you know what I'm saying, things, listen to the same music, doing the same, like it's not, there's no individuality. So I encourage you all to just seek your own path to the absolute truth that's already been carved out. You know what I mean? For real. Yeah, someone wants to come up. Hey, Faise, do you know a Tuki?
You saying a Tuki?
A Tuki? That's somebody who wants to come up. I'm sorry, I don't know the person. I was say if you know it.
Mm, nah, I don't know.
Oh, no disrespect, bro. If I don't know people like that, I don't typically let them up on lives. I don't
Yeah,
know
if they can
what.
comment, I might recognize them. I'm not
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah. I don't know what I'm gonna get when people just pop up on the lives. You know what I'm saying? But back to what we're talking about. Getting back to the garden, going back to this garden, and this tree of life, this tree of life, and it's eternity. Um, can man obtain this eternity in the flesh, and what does that look like to you guys?
I'll let the brother go. I've been speaking. I'll come follow up with him.
Oh, in the flesh, man, it's in the flesh. It costs so much more. The flesh decays faster than the spirit, so I don't see it playing out nicely. You look at people who do a lot of plastic surgery and whatnot. It looks pretty for like maybe 2 weeks, and, you know what I mean. And then it starts to look like you start to look like a lizard. Actually, weirdly enough, especially when you age.
Yeah, that's the draconian. That's the real draconian.
You know what I'm saying? It's an archetype, but it manifests through people's manipulation of their own. There's a term limit on the flesh, unfortunately, but you could manifest through your children. That's a good way to transfer essence into flesh, right? They might even outdo you if you do it well enough. Isn't
Mm.
that the whole point of children? I think. Am I reaching here? I
No.
mean, it
You
No,
seems.
no, no.
you on
You are
point?
Yeah, yeah. I
definitely.
mean, that's what I see as children. It's like a promise, right? Children are a promise to the future. It's like, yeah, I could. There's something else outside of me that I should be giving my energy to.
That's a fact. That's
You
definitely.
know, like they're not your possession. At some point, they're gonna grow into their own people. They have, like he was mentioning how like a woman is something that a man has to kind of like approach to, and when you get older as a man, you mature, you become more. You have attributes of a woman more so than you would think. You'd be more reasonable.
It's
You try
true.
to negotiate more, being more nurturing. You can't be as rough as your father was with you than you are with your daughter, for example. Like, and that's the truth. You can't escape that shit. That's not. If you try to escape that, then you're playing with the devil. In a sense.
I can
Righteous.
dig it.
Here's what I say to be brief, and let's keep in mind. Right now, I'm in a man form, so it ain't like I'm a woman on here talking about the woman. This guy, I'm in the man form. I have no problem with these truths because this is what it is. We say when you're dealing with truth, it's like, okay, I get it. Let's deal with the science. Notice I ain't just say I just believe the woman is God because she's so beautiful and I want to be up under her and kiss her feet. I went to the science and said let's deal with the science. So the tree of life is a science just as well as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a science. I would say yes. Not only can man access it, women can access it. Any capable beings who have the body that's able, the mind that's able to retain, or the brain that's able to retain the information of it, can access it. And brother makes a good point when he's saying, yo, what about your children? Because when you yield children, it's like you're starting over. That's why even in the orders, Masonic orders, all of that, you have to be born again. There's some type of rebirth to say that that which was you in this flesh, right, has to pass away. Nirvana, the reason why a lot of Buddhas didn't accept the teachings. People don't think that, a lot of people don't know that, but not every Buddha agreed with Nirvana. Some people rejected the science and say, yo, we want to experience heaven on earth. We don't want to wait and have to die and sacrifice our flesh in order to reach heaven. Same thing people are saying now. Umar Johnson said, "What? I want to. If I have to die and go to heaven," it never said you have to do that, but you know that they take the most basic information and say that's what it is. So the point is, if man wants to, you about to say something, Happy?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you consider nirvana a static state?
It's static. You saying?
Yeah. Do you think it's just a static state? Because once you reach it,
That's a good
you're
question.
in.
What
You
I
know.
say, what I say is, I don't know what happens after nirvana, because the truth is, nirvana is like saying you reach the nine. Interestingly enough, Miguel came with a song called Number Nine, and I'll actually tell you to go listen to that. And in the song, he has in the chorus, he says something about until the dust returns to the number nine. And we just broke down how the dust was referring to the ground of the Adam, right? That's the translation. You get Adam into dust, you get Adama into the ground, you get different ways that it comes out. Adama, H, you put an H on it, it changes it. You take the AR to change, but it's still saying ground or dust or the clay or the Nesut realm. So I wouldn't say for sure that it's an aesthetic plane or that's as high as it gets. Or no, all I can say is based off of what I've been taught or what I learned from the schools, that when you reach that state, you're letting go, just like they said in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, you're letting go of sorrow, you're letting go of the pains of death and all the different things, because it's the struggling mind that you're letting go, and you're shedding this carnal brain. So they say that the root of all struggling is what? Pleasure.
Desire.
Exactly, desire. So here's what I say to keep it brief. Yes, man can access the tree of life. Human beings can access the tree of life if we're going based off of how it was set up. Because if they would have, evaded or escaped the desire and the lust, or the what you call the trap or the beguilement, whatever they want to call it, the offer is really the word. If they escaped or refused the offer of whoever the Nekash was, if he was supposed to be this one who leads you to deception, or just exposes you to something before you were even ready or developed mentally to be able to handle it, if they would have just went and ate of the tree of life, then they would have accessed whatever piece of information that was, that let's say they do go in and reproduce or find another way. Now they understand it to the point where all the information that they just took in is being passed on, again, through their offspring and through their children. So I would say, yes, you can. It's just which part of you are you activating? Because if your flesh is attached to this world and this left, right, or this negative, positive, or this push and pull, or this vibration that comes with sex, it's the friction that causes you to have an ejaculation. Even when people masturbate, it's the friction, the left and the right, or the up and the down. Even when there's a sexual act. Go ahead.
Now watch this. Now can you see why there were a lot of yogis that did not agree with nirvana? Because
I was saying.
Yeah, because they understand that when you're talking about eternity, and when you're talking about this spiraling, eternity would have to deal with this constant reoccurrence. It would have to deal with this constant reoccurrence. And if the way that nirvana is described, it sets up almost like this static place where now I'm there and I'm not allowed this spiraling or this going back in and out and, you know, this inward outward kind of a thing.
Right.
You know,
That's why it wasn't recorded to be the last stage in all actuality. That's why I say I don't know it to be the last stage or this is static level, because in all actuality it comes muksha. And muksha says, what? I want to escape this. Exactly. I want to escape this cycle. I want to get out of this. And what's so interesting, the reason why I'm saying, look at the word muksha, or you say muksha, listen, muksha. And you remember all of the ancient ones or the people who was coming through, certain communities still to this day, or groups of people to this day who don't want you to film them or photograph them, because they say if you do so, you're capturing their essence and trapping them in the earth plane. So you say, when you say, I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah, got you.
So it's like you say a mugshot is a picture, and the mugshot is to say, let's escape. So what I'll say is, the reason why I'm not able to even really speak beyond what they recorded on that is because if we're going from one, let's go back to Miguel, because Miguel is Michael, right? It's the same word in all actuality. Michael, which means Mikael, or one who was like El. And he's making a song called Number Nine. He also performed, I broke that down about the rope, and he's saying just get connected and tied up to the light in heaven and raised up to the, all right. If we're saying that this person reaches this level, and that's the 9 or the number 9 level, and the dust returns to the number 9 level, or actually escapes to the number 9 level, then we don't know a number higher than 9. We don't know a color brighter than white. So I'm not aware of what happens outside of the parameters of consciousness that I've been provided. I have no, I
So
don't even know how